Now, can you hear me?
Yeah. You can hear.
We begin our session with this purifying and motivating sound of the conch, which is a common theme. Blowing a conch or a blowhorn is a common theme for any auspicious event within an Indo-African culture. Greetings, friends. Myself, Amit Chatterjee. I'm from Mumbai. I specialize on e-governance, smart cities, and cybersecurity, and I represent the team behind Africa Study Center. Before we start, there are some house rules which are mentioned on the screen. Please keep your phone on mute on all the times. Please keep your mic on mute on all the times unless you wish to speak. And please keep your cameras on so that we can see you all the time. There is one more request. If possible, please mention your name and the country of origin or the country where you are joining this session at present. With this, I welcome you all to the inaugural session of Africa Study Center. Africa Study Center aims to provide a platform for dialogue and discussion on Indo-African subjects with the aim to build mutual cooperation and respect. Historically, we are all aware that the Indian subcontinent originated from Africa, and we have been connected ever since, be it through trade, knowledge, or the pursuit of peace and self-rule. It's by taking this spirit ahead today, we will be participating in an interesting session on Indo-African relationship with the aim of developing an understanding of our shared history. To take this event ahead, I would like to introduce you with our host for the evening, Mrs. Deepti Kataria. She is an engineer and head of physics in Royal College, Cairo in Egypt. She has been living in Egypt for over 20 years, and she has been serving the youth community in Cairo through various aspects of social service to serve the community. I would like her to introduce our key speakers for the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Amitji. Namaste. Welcome, Habari. A very warm welcome on behalf of African Study Center. Today's webinar schedule brushes upon the spectrum of theme, discusses the understanding of shared history of Indo-African and similarities between these two great cultures. Africa Study Center sees Africa's prosperous and peaceful continent to contribute effectively in the wider world through its academic insight. Before I invite our distinguished speakers, Dr. Paul Katuse and Dr. Yashwanth V. Pathak, I'd like to describe the agenda for today's program. It includes 10 minutes of speech from both the speakers. Along with that, we will have a dialogue between them, and then we will have a chance to interact with these distinguished speakers through our further queries. Now it's my delight to introduce our first guest speakers. Our first speaker for this evening is Dr. Paul Katuse. He is originally from Kenya and currently working as an associate professor of School of Business in UAE. Dr. Katuse has earned his PhD from India in the strategic management in year 2002. Dr. Katuse is an experienced academician and has worked in several countries of Africa and Asia. He has been consulted with the public and private sectors in Kenya too. His main interests are global issues and their impacts on organizations on developing economies. He has of late taken keen interest in the way organization and society interact. Dr. Paul Katuse believes in the concept of chorestra, that is consulting, research, and training so as to bring an impact. Today, Dr. Paul Katuse will be talking about Indo-African development and understanding of our shared history. I request Dr. Paul to commence.
Thank you very much, Deputy. And I do believe that I'm audible. Yeah, as she has just said, my name is Dr. Paul Katuse. I am an academician from Kenya. Kenya is in East Africa. And for the time being, I'm in the UAE, specifically Sharjah, which is, I believe, a twin city of Dubai. Now, in terms of today's theme or the topic, Indo-Africa, developing an understanding of our shared history, in actual sense, we can't be able to talk about our shared history until we go back to the times when the two kinds of people, the two communities, the two societies began interacting. And so I would love to talk about this specifically, bearing in mind that there is before colonization and after colonization, because these are two epic times whereby we can actually see specifically the relationship, and out of the relationships, similarities have actually done what? Come up. Now, in pre-colonial times, the relationship between the Indo and the African society wasn't so high. And in fact, the fact that it wasn't so high, I'm saying that because I'm basing my assertion on what is documented. Maybe what is undocumented may be there. And in actual sense, when now it comes to the interaction, it was on the basis of trade. And the first time these two communities came to share, came to interact, actually was in around the 15th century, the 16th, 17th century, and it was more specific through the East African and the Horn of African region. It was through Egypt. And also, even though the South African bit is an extension of the East African, that is the Mozambique coast, it is specifically war between these regions. The Central and the Western Africa came later. Now, the Egyptian contact, because Egypt is in Africa, Northern Africa, they in actual sense came into contact with the Indians during the times of the Roman Empire, which was actually being administered in Egypt by the Greeks during the Indus Valley civilization and all that. In that of East Africa, Horn of Africa, and Mozambique, which is part of South Africa, the contact was specifically facilitated through the use of monsoon winds through Arabia, which again was through trade. The two communities could trade, but actual interaction was not that high. They were only concerned with making money, I think. And so from there, colonization in actual sense kind of speeded up the interaction. And through colonization, two main outcomes can be looked into, which helped enhance this interaction and therefore the integration of the communities, leading to more similarities. The first one was when it was happening, there was a forced recruitment of African men who were of fighting age, in actual sense from teenage men, to join the British Army those long time ago, which was involved all over the world in the First World War, in the Second World War, for them to go and fight for the British outside there. Number two, the other outcome was through infrastructural construction, which saw Indians through the indentured labor being brought by the same British from India to Africa to help construct the infrastructure. Now, after that now, interaction was not also very high because this interaction was specifically being moderated by the colonizer. However, because of the moderation, the two groups felt that this one who is moderating tends to, in actual sense, be only concerned about their well-being. And these two joined forces, they began learning from each other. And so now the scampering for independence began happening. So now after independence, trade increased and migration also increased from specifically India all the way to Africa. But in this, at this moment, I would like to take you back before colonialism. During those early days, and especially in the eastern parts of Africa, through the trade between the Indian people through Arabia, some African people were taken to India. In fact, they are distributed all over. You'll go and find them in Pakistan, in a certain coastal city in Pakistan. Maybe the historians here can tell us about that. In India, you'll find them in Gujarat. You'll find them in Karnataka. You'll find them, I think, in Tamil Nadu. And so now those are the Africans in India, and we now have Indians in Africa. The Africans in India went there a long time ago, but most of the Africans in India, or rather Indians in Africa, came later. Now, we, in actual sense, cannot discount the role of Mahatma Gandhi in all these, and especially after colonialism. And so now, this has, and especially after colonialism, led to the confluence of a lot of similarities. First and foremost, the confluence of culture, which of course entails language, religion, and all that, and the enhancement of more trade and the migrations of people from one region to the other, and then the national exchanges, which have become official in the sense that different countries are having a relationship between themselves and India, different countries in Africa. However, there is an overall relationship which I do believe India has with Africa. Africa, with its now currently 56 countries. Previously, there used to be 4, but we have 2, which in actual sense are still in a state of being recognized nationwide, or rather internationally. That is Somaliland and Western Sahara. And so because of these now similarities have come up in terms of the language. Language, which is always changing on a daily basis, you'll find out that in actual sense, it is becoming more similar because as society changes, so are the changes which are required to fill in that very void in the change. For example, I can tell you a good example. You may find a Punjabi, a Punjab person, a Punjab kid in Durban who can clearly speak in Xhosa or Zulu language, a Gujarati young man in Nairobi who can speak any of the local languages. But if you ask that person to possibly speak in any of the Indian languages, possibly what they know is just greetings, namaste, namaste, all that. Now, religion in actual sense is also another aspect whereby the confluence of similarities have been there. For example, when you look into the major religion in India, whereby we have Hinduism, there are some similarities between what used to be, let me just say what used to be, because when change happened, most of the Africans adopted Judaic religions. And so previously, when you look into those who still practice, there are similarities in terms of the religion. Like, for example, you'll find out that an aspect of naming is to be found. An aspect of foodstuffs, meaning that there are certain foods which are to be taken at certain times, not all through. And so looking into all these similarities, you'll find out that if we were to rewind back, of which we can't, there were more similarities which were there, possibly not documented, than we want to know. But as of today, in terms of the contemporary relationship, because of globalization, we are having much more of these similarities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Katuse. Uh, as you have mentioned, we have many similarities, including certain food and certain times, transition of Africans in India and Indian Africans, and role of Mahatma Gandhi ji cannot be ignored at the same time. I want to grab your attention for one more thing. We have guests and audience from more than 12 countries. So I would like to welcome everybody once again. And now I would like to welcome our second guest speaker, Dr. Yashwanth V. Pathak. It's an honor to introduce him. Dr. Pathak is an internationally known scholar, researcher, and educator in the area of nanotechnology and drug delivery system. He is an RSS Pracharak and had spent significant time in various countries of Africa, including some villages as well. He has traveled enormously, almost 80 countries, and he has studied in depth the indigenous cultures of many countries, including Africa, South America, Maori, and many more. After studying and being part of numerous culture, he has a strong belief that every human has a right to reach the God by the way he wants. He has edited several books in the field of nanotechnology. He has published more than 50 books by himself. He was one of the pioneers and key organizers of Hindu conference, which had taken place in Durban in 1995, which was attended by almost 42,000 people across South Africa. He is also one of the founding members of International Center for Cultural Studies, that is ICCS, in Africa. It is a platform for preservation and protection of indigenous and ancient cultures over the world. Today, he'll be talking about the Afro-Hindu similarities. Dr. Pathak.
Thank you, Dr. Dipti. It was really a very long introduction. It appears that I'm going to get a text message from Satiji that your time has been reduced now by another 3-4 minutes. But thank you for a wonderful introduction. I think I don't deserve that, to be honest with you. But anyway, first of all, I would like to congratulate you all for starting such a wonderful initiative, which is very timely and it needs to be done because in the global scenario, this initiative will really have a significant impact. And it is very important for India and Africa to come together. And there has to be something on which they can come together. And those are, I think, the cultural similarities and the uh, commonalities which are existing in both the cultures can really bring us together. And then as a team, we can really bring changes into the global scenario. And that is why I thought that this initiative is one of the best initiatives which are happening here. I would like to congratulate Dr. Paul Katuse for his wonderful presentation. It was very thorough and I really enjoyed. He's a distinguished professor and I'm very happy I did not meet him. I had been to Kenya several times, but hopefully my next trip to Kenya, I will have interaction or I will have to go to UAE probably. The Afro-Hindu cultural similarities, when you look back and if you see the history of the world, you'll find that ancient evidences of civilization have been found in Africa as well as in India and some other parts of the world also. But it is interesting to see that when the colonial rule started in these countries, they tried to make this history within the time frame of biblical time frame. So they started telling that the Vedas were happening just 2,500 years back and this, that, and all the thing. Same thing happened with Africa. And now it becomes very, those who are studying history and those who are studying the archaeology, it becomes very interesting because the evidences based on scientific techniques are showing that the existence of human being in Africa was more than 60,000 years. And this is where the things are changing, and I hope in another few years or few decades the world history will have to be started from Africa, and that is where the due credit has to be given to the um, existence of this beautiful civilization for many years. And second thing is that, there is a very nice African proverb which says that if the history of hunting is written by the lions, it will be much different. And exactly the same thing will happen, that nobody ever tells us that the Ethiopian king had defeated 16 times the French army. 16 times, not even 1 second, 16 times. When the first European landed in the Western Africa, they found that it was a very developed culture. They were having beautiful roads and everything. So they destroyed it. And then they started claiming that this is our African burden. But I don't want to go there. What I would like to bring to your notice are the similarities in the African traditions and the Hindu traditions. One very interesting similarity is that Africans built up their theology or their thought processes, their thinking based on applicability to the total humanity. And in Akan moral system, one of the very important African traditions in West Africa, it is the good moral values is determined in terms of its consequences for humankind and human society. So anything which an African person, Akan, want to do, he will think twice how it is going to affect the human society at large. And that's why all their thought processes were applicable to total humanity, and not only total humanity, but human being in totality. So you pick up any, Africa is full of beautiful proverbs, a lot of wisdom is there in those proverbs. And if you pick up any proverb from the African tradition, you'll find that it is applicable to any person on earth. It is applicable to total humanity. For example, Igbo is a tribe, and Igbo tells a beautiful proverb, very, very down to earth proverb. It says that even the blade of grass cannot move its head without the permission of the God. What a beautiful thing, that how vulnerable you are, that without the permission of God, even the glad breath is not moving who you are then. And this is where the importance of spirit, or importance of God, and importance of deities happened in the African life. On the contrary, if you look at the Hindu traditions, you go to any part of the world, now they are spread all over the world, and sit in any temple. I was in Suriname, and I was sitting in Suriname, is a South American country. I was sitting up, participating in one of the temple, and interestingly, they were all chanting the mantra, and one of the mantra immediately I started chanting. That was Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkhama Bhavet, Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Let everybody be happy. It is the thought process for the total humanity. Let everybody be happy. Hindus have never said only Hindus will be happy or only one group of people will be happy. It has always been talked about total humanity. And the other part which is very common within the African and the Hindus is the thought process about human being in totality. Very interesting. Africans have a concept as well as Hindu. That concept is called ancestors. And it is so interesting that Africans, they think that the three generations before you are considered as living ancestors, and three before that those three generations, all the ancestors are considered to be dead ancestors. And it is very logical, because the people, whether I want it or not, my great grandfather has influenced my personality, because he has influenced my grandfather's personality, my grandfather influenced my father's personality, and my father is a total influence on me. And this is where the three generations are very strongly connected with each other, whether we want. And that is why they are living ancestors, because they can interfere with your day-to-day life. This is how we think, that they can interfere with your day-to-day life. And then there is the dead ancestors. Beyond that, in America, I am presently in United States, and we have garage sales. So nobody will sell the picture of the father, picture frame of the father or the grandfather or great grandfather. As soon as it comes to the fourth generation, they say, oh, say, I have never seen this person, I don't know his person, I have no attachment with this person. And this is where the Africans thought that anything you create will not exist after 100 years. It is very interesting thought process. It is for total humanity and human being totality. Nothing can exist, or you cannot get. That's why you have, nobody gets credit. There are thousands of wise things, wisdom, knowledge is there in African tradition. Nobody knows who has done that, who has written those proverbs. Nobody knows. The same thing happens with the Hindu philosophy. In Vedic, there is a Veda, there are so many scriptures are there. Very few times people will take the credit for what I am doing, because we know after 100 years it's gone. Nobody is going to be remembering you. And that's why the Africans always worry about the living ancestors. They pray the living ancestors. And then there is a small prayer for the ancestors. In Hindu tradition, suppose I want to do the Shraddha ceremony for my father or my family, I invoke the spirit of my father, invoke the spirit of my grandfather, invoke the spirit of my great grandfather, and that's and then I go to the old ancient man who is supposed to be the beginning of the clan, in the way my group or whatever you want to call it. So this is how the dead ancestors. So in order to get all these things happening, the Africans have created sacraments. In Hindu, they call it samskara. Africans have sacraments. So there are many different types of training. I am very closely involved with one of the organizations called Yoruba Enlightenment and Spirituality Center, based in Washington, D.C. They are in Washington, D.C., but they have a program where they run it like a Gurukul. It is a 12-year-long training program to become a shaman in Yoruba tribe, to become a priest in the Yoruba tribe. It is very interesting. Same thing you'll find it. And this is where the sacraments play a major important role in both these traditions. They are very important because that is a continuation of the wisdom, continuation of the knowledge, continuation of all the rituals from one generation to other generations. I was just joking last time that I was asked whether I'm going to come up with a PowerPoint presentation or some writing or anything. And I said, hey, we all believe in oral history. Because you have to say all these things to your heart. People have to remember it. If you have, we are going through a very great revolution of electronic media and whatnot, lot of knowledge on that. But you don't remember it unless you go to, if the computer doesn't work, you are dumb because you have no access to the knowledge there. And that is where the Africans as well as Hindus gave a significant importance to the oral traditions. And it is very interesting to see that the diversity in Africa parallels with the diversity in India. It's, 54 countries, more than 3,000 traditions, every languages are there. And I always talk to, when I used to travel, I met so many African people, they will identify which person belong to which group very easily. based on their appearance, based on their dressing, based on their eating habit, based on their. So there are characteristics attached to this diversity. And in spite of all this diversity, the structure within the thought process has been very common in these traditions, even though it is superficially it appears to be a very diverse group of people, many countries, many languages, many dress ways, but there is a very common thought process, whether it is African from Africa, Nigeria, Yoruba, or from Zulu in South Africa, or Kikuyu in Kenya. You know, the concept of creating life, way of life, was more utilitarian. You know, it was never a revelation process in African tradition. Same thing happened in Indian traditions also. That it is not simply somebody came and revealed and then the whole world started following it. In Africa, they adopted their tradition, their thought processes as a way of life, as a way of life, because it is a way of life and it is a moving, flowing river. It changes over the period of time according to the utility of that particular thought process at particular time. And they are flexible in thinking process. And that's why these concepts which Africans develop for their religious traditions or for their putting this society together are humanistic in nature, are utilitarian in nature, and it always focused on improving the social functioning and human flourishing. This is a very important aspect of African tradition, that Africans have worked for improving the social functioning and human flourishing. And this is very important because if you look at the mm, other side, on the Hindu side, it almost same thing. You know, I was wondering when first time I went to South Africa in 1993, I performed as many havans in one day as I had performed in my whole life, because havan was so important in South Africa. And every house you go, they will do some puja and you have to participate in the havan and all the things. In India, I didn't do that because the history had changed, but the people who lived in South Africa, they were like a history in frozen scenario. So what they brought 150 years back, they still continued with that. And that was their way of life. Things have changed. And I see same thing you can see in Bali also. If you go to Bali, it's a very strong impact, very uh, great culture. But if somebody from India goes there, they think, oh my God, how they are doing this? What is this? Because this flowing river, the things have stuck there probably. And then they adopted a lot of modification there. But that is very important. Another thing which is very important is the social welfare. In African traditions, social welfare has never been dependent on individualistic achievements. Social welfare has been a collective social good. And that's why the collective social good thought process always encourage the collectivities or communitarianism, which is community-based thought processes. And Africans have really built, and cooperation and altruism are considered to be crucial for African ethics and places more weight and duties on pro-social behavior than on the individual rights. Exactly same thing we do in Bharat also, and I can give you a very small example. Uh, One of our friend who stayed in America took care of his father-in-law and mother-in-law. He resigned his job. He took care of it. They were placed there because he thought that it is his responsibility to take care of the parents. And this is where the concept of dharma came into the picture, that African people, without saying it is dharma, created a dharma. The dharma can be easily interpreted in terms of African thought processes, social well-being, collective thought processes, not individualistic thought process, and good for the society, bringing the society together, leaving the society for a long time. And that is where it has a history of 60,000 years. And obviously, the more and more humanity will adopt these thought processes from cultures, it will be, and look at how the Hindus have developed the dharma. They understood that everything has to follow a rule. Fire has to burn the things. So the dharma of fire becomes burning. Water has to flow. So dharma of the water becomes flowing. Then we, over the period of time, as the family started putting together, living together, there started the relationship between father and son, well, husband and wife, and then it turned out to be a putra dharma. Putra dharma is the responsibility of a child to take care of the father. Pitru dharma, matru dharma, all these concepts were developed, and same things are there in African traditions also. I used to have a friend who was a pediatrician. We worked together in Israel. He was from Kenya. He used to say that when my great grandfather, who is 110 years old, sits on the chair, his son, who is 90 years old, stands next, then grandson, 70 years old, great grandson, all of them are standing because there is a respect to the elders. So there are so many. The African thought process is putting all people together, sabko jodne wala, bringing all the people together. And that's what our concept is, the dharna dharma ityahu. And then this dharma has to uplift the person. It should not put the person down, because society will go down. So the concepts have to be developed in such a way that it will always lead to the upliftment of the people. So I think there are so many traditional similarities. My time is almost over. So I will just enumerate things. The African traditions also believe in some form of rebirth and birth, continuously doing good work. I'm going to conclude my thing with the last quotation. Colorful diversity is part of their life. They express their thought processes in terms of arts, all the beautiful sculptures, languages, diversity. And there are, one of the most important thing is Africans are not satisfied with, they know that ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. There is a one ultimate Olokun, or they call it by many different names, the Great Spirit. But then the Great Spirit is now manifested in terms of smaller spirits, and there are so many deities, so many gods, so many goddesses are there. So there is no gender bias when it comes to the divinity. There is no gender bias in Africa, neither in Bharat also. So I think, and in Africans also, they have a very interesting task allotment. There is a god called Mujaji. He is the rain god. There is a god, Ogun. He is a god of war and iron. So each of these, Olorun is a sky god. So Ishu, trickster or messenger god. Now there is a group called Bugunda. They express this manifestation in 20 different types of gods and goddesses. Imagine, one small group of people have 20 different gods and goddesses. So obviously, identifying divinity and Allah, offering divinity is part of African tradition. Same thing happens in India also. I would like to conclude my uh, presentation with a great quotation, which I heard it from my great friend from Kenya. Uh, his name is Ruben Thuku. Ruben was blind, but one of the, I had met very great. He's like a saintly person. I met him in Kenya, very well thorough with Hindu philosophy and African philosophy. So he quoted when he was in South Africa for our conference. He came as the chief guest, and believe it or not, he got the standing ovation. When he concluded his topic, he was talking about Afro-Hindu similarity. So he said that every person, every human being carries a idlozi, a spark. You can call it a spirit or a spark, or in Hindus, they call it soul. But this idlozi, over the period of time, undergoing births and rebirths several times, and every birth doing a lot of good work, doing good for the society, doing good for the earth, Mother Earth. You know, there is a absolute connection of Africans with Mother Earth. They always claim themselves to be children of the Mother Earth. There are many African families, they don't even use plow even today. So obviously this relationship with Sky God and Mother Earth are same. What we also think that way, because we say, Mata Bhumi, Putro Ham Prithvivyam, Mother Earth is my mother and I am the son of the mother. So, and then this idlozi over the period of undergoing several birth and rebirth, doing a lot of good things for society, gets assimilated into Ithongo, which is the ultimate spirit, as if a raindrop water gets assimilated into ocean. So every African thinks themselves to be a raindrop water, and they perceive the spirit, the great spirit, as ocean. And the same relationship we also pursue in terms of Atman and Paramatman and the concept of moksha. So there are so many similarities. Within 10 minutes, I try to cover some of these, and I hope if you have any questions, I'll be definitely happy to answer those with the help of Dr. Paul Katuse. I will count on him more than me. Thank you very much. Dhanyavad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yashwanth Pathak ji. You have talked about several stuff, including history, religion, dharma, what are the dharma concept between the thought process having the Africans and the Indians, Atman, Paramatman, religious, spiritual level. You have taken quite a diverse and variety of talks in that. Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask a question, and Dr. Paul Katuse first, and then Dr. Yashwanth ji, you please enter as well. For our question, Dr. Katuse, you had said that we have a lot of confluence of similarities, culture, language, religion. So if that's so, we have also a worry that there is a lot of poverty in Africa as well. So can you tell us the procedure to be initiated to as a remedy for poverty and violence, which is overshadowing Africa in spite of having all these cultural heritages? What are the ways you can think about?
Thank you very much, Lucy. And to answer your question, I would like to fuse what I said and what professors just said. And generally, in terms of what I said, I was talking on understanding specific areas whereby we share, that is us Africans and the Indian people. Now, when you look into what I had said and what here said, you realize that first and foremost, in terms of the African expression of worship, that is a religion, this was done, and for those who still practice African traditional religion, on the basis of functionality. In other words, need basis. He spoke of rain god. All over Africa, you find out that when the rains delayed, there were people who were called rainmakers, or elders who, or persons who had been specifically given the responsibility to go and appease the gods for the rains to happen. And trust you me, from what we are told, it used to happen. Now, when you actually look into the impact of culture, African culture by the other cultures, you realize that though the African culture was based on functionality, need basis, the other cultures came, okay, which was similar actually to the Indian culture. The other culture, can I call it Western culture, kind of was more and is up to today more commercial. And so now the commercial aspect, which wasn't there previously, came over and kind of swept everything clean. Now, the question which now you want me to answer is, on the basis of culture, how can this be used to eradicate poverty? Now, I will not go very far. I will speak specifically of where I come from, that is Kenya. Long time ago, it is said that when the Indians came over to build the railway, part of the infrastructure of the country, when they are working under the hot sun, carrying heavy steel, sometimes they could actually invite each other to help each other do a task. And sometimes they could shout, Hare Ambe, which is actually calling on to, I think, an Hindu god called Ambe. Out of Hare Ambe, there was a word formed, which up to today is actually a constitutional word in Kenya called Harambe, which is found on the coat of arms, on the money, and everywhere. And now to Kenya, this concept of Harambe means, and I think most of East Africans, we pull resources together, we come together and eradicate a certain problem, mostly economic problem, most an issue whereby everybody contributes up to a certain level. Now, when you look at that, if that is to happen as per the specific word, then we'll not have too much of what is now being put in terms of poverty. And then there's one statement which the professor said, and I think it's a quote. I want to quote him and also quote the former president of South Africa, the late Nelson Mandela. The professor said, and that is very true, if the history of hunting is to be actually written by the hunter, it will only glorify the hunter, not the hunted. Most of the West came in to hunt. I don't need to say more. Now, Nelson Mandela also said that, it is said that, he said that if you speak to a man in a language he understands, it goes to his mind. But if you speak to his language, it goes to the heart. And I think that is where we now need to go. The confluence of the language, which eventually will lead us into coming out of the most of the so-called poverty in Africa is this actually as a consequence of this undue influence. And again, because, well, the Westerners own the means of communication. They will actually depict the image which serves them right. And so in actual sense, to eradicate this poverty, the concept I said of Harambe is necessary, pulling together. Number two, there's another concept called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu, being an African concept, simply means that I am there because you are there. Meaning that any decision I do make must be evaluated in terms of the impact it will have on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. As you said, if the history was written by a hunter, the history would have been different. And Dr. Yashwanth V said the same, if the history was written by a lion, it would have been totally different. It depends on the perception. So I'll go to the Pathak ji also, this question, I'll forward this question, that how can we, in this Abrahamic religion, Africa is following the Abrahamic religion, how can somebody follow the dharma? Or how can he follow this dharma into the mainstream?
You know, there are several movements in Africa. They call it indigenization of Christianity. And they have done that. You know, the acceptance of Christianity was, they had no option, that's why it has happened. But then they indigenized Christian churches into the traditional church. And I will give you a very good example. If you come to Trinidad, we have several of West Africans who moved to Trinidad during the slave trade. And then there were people who were, they all were working in the sugarcane field. And over the period of time, they started interacting. The Hindus used to chant Tulsi Ramayana, and the Africans used to chant their African traditional systems because it is all oral tradition. And um, gradually, the Africans understood that their concept of God is well depicted in certain pictures of the Hindu gods. So in Trinidad, there are more than 100 churches, right? Those next door to the church, there is a Yoruba temple, they call it. And if you enter in the Yoruba temple, you'll find as if you are, because they have a god called Hanumana type god. So they adopted the picture of Hanumana. There is a concept of goddess Saraswati, they adopted it. And these Africans who go to church, do the prayer, and then come out. And if their son is suffering from some disease, then they will take a pumpkin and break it in the Yoruba temple and then say, "Oh God, I am offering this pumpkin to you. Please get rid of the disease from my child's body." So this is happening, the indigenization. And but you know, African traditions are way of life. African traditions are dharma. They are not religions. So you can practice Christianity uh, as a religion, but you can adopt your own dharma, so that what Dr. Katuse was saying, Harambe and Ubuntu, these words should be immediately incorporated into Oxford Dictionary, because they have to learn these words, because there is no parallel word for Harambe or Ubuntu in English. Like there are hundreds of words in Sanskrit which have no parallel meanings. Even there is no parallel word for dharma also. Regarding the poverty, what I thought was that it was the nature of the people in Africa. They believed in Atithi Devo Bhava. So they invited the people, they offered them things, and then they took the Bible in their hand and land was gone. So this it's not the poverty because of the Africans. It is the poverty because of the greed of the other people. You come to the West, I wonder, I was working in United Kingdom, and one of the person who was with me in the lab, he said that, "Hey, do you ever get these type of facilities of research in India?" I said, if India would have grown only potato and mustard seeds, we would have come to England and take away all your stuff, and we would have had all this what you have because of us. Your Western development and everything is on the at the cost of the Africans. All this development which you see outside is not their own thing. They exploited, and that's why it looks like so. African poverty is not because of the Africans. It is because of the other people who exploited them. And I think the more um, and it is same happening for applicable to Hindus also. The more we become stronger African, the more we become culturally strong in African traditions and religions, I'm sure things will absolutely change. And it appears that in another 10, 15 years, the economic center is also going to move towards Africa, because they are the only people who have all the minerals, everything is there. It is simply the leadership. And once that comes in through, Africa is going to lead the world because of their traditional wisdom.
Thank you, Pathakji. Very true. I will pass this question to Dr. Paul, but before that, Dr. Paul, just excuse me for a second. We have few distinguished guests who have joined us today in this program. We would like to welcome Dr. Burian. She is Tanzania's High Commissioner, served as the Ministry of State in the Vice President's Office, Environment, and was nominated Member of Parliament from 2010, 6 to 10, before her appointment as High Commissioner to Kenya. She previously served as Deputy Minister of Community Development, Gender and Children from January 2005 to October 2006. Dr. Burian also holds a PhD in Planning Studies, Planning Unit from University College of London. Welcome, Dr. Burian. We also have Shri Jitu Bhai Patel ji with us. He is a chairman of Noble Tanzania Group and is a great supporter for Indo-Africa relationship. Welcome, Jitu Bhai. Now I will further pass on this same question as Dr. Pathak ji has answered to Dr. Paul.
Can you please repeat if you won't mind?
Yes, we were talking about how dharma, Dr. Pathak ji has just mentioned that dharma and religion are two different aspects. Dharma is duty or something to sustain. So what do you see? How can someone follow the dharma?
Thank you. Now, answer this given question, I really may not be so much confident or so much deep into theology, but when you look into specifically what we as Africans actually have, previously from our beliefs, African traditional beliefs, and as I said, I live because you live. You find out that different people had different, you can call them professions, in the sense that you will find out that a certain clan was known for doing certain tasks. Like for example, a certain clan was good when it comes to hunting. Another clan was good when it comes to growing of tobacco, etc. Now, I would like to actually contrast this with the aspect of religion and spirituality. Going back to your older question, that there may be poverty in Africa, but how do we overcome this? Now, looking into communities, you realize that in actual sense, communities or societies which tended to be more religious tended to be less economically stronger, meaning poverty was more. But as we talk about today, if you actually were to take stock of what is happening in Europe, Europeans are moving from religion to their traditional beliefs. Churches, mosques, and temples which had been built long time ago, now in actual sense are serving as shops, discotheques, yet they are still rich. So I tend to connect the aspect of religion with spirituality. And that is the biggest issue, because as an African, I possibly will tend to be spiritually alert, but the religion which has been commercialized is just there as a covering, like just a jacket for everybody to realize, he is a Christian, she is a Hindu, he is a Muslim. And so when that is the case, you realize that that which came, the Abrahamic faith, came over to Africa. It kind of taught people that what had been yours is bad. So we need to begin from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. So you have mentioned the spirituality and the religion, two different aspects. We have a lot of questions in our chat box. So we will begin with Pritenji. Pritenji has a question to ask.
We can't hear.
Oh, sorry. Hello? Can you, okay. This is more so a question for Dr. Katuse. In remote villages of Africa, some people might still be practicing traditional African customs, rituals. I think you did mention that in part of your talk. Do you foresee that in the next maybe 15 to 20 years, some of the urban population will start adopting some form of traditional practice that their forefathers followed?
Thank you very much. Now, when you look into what is happening in Africa, the rate of urbanization is very high. And in actual sense, most governments are actually working towards that. They want to pull people out of the village and put them in the cities. But the question which you need to ask, or rather, as you've said, is to know is there possibly is a likelihood of that not being really eroded. Why? Because when people move with what they feel is theirs. And even though they may move and with what is theirs, they go and still look for functionality. In Nairobi, and I think maybe down south in South Africa, you will move along the cities and you will see placards of traditional healers and the numbers. What does that tell you? It tells you that these guys have come to the city and they are still carrying what was theirs. So in the 15 years to come, possibly that is not going to end. Maybe it may actually increase. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. We have next question from Amitji, he has typed. So Amitji, I also request all our delegates, all our distinguished guests to please type your questions in the chat box so we can pick your questions. Amitji.
My question is to maybe just a minute. My question is, sorry, my question is to Dr. Paul. As you know, India is a very heterogeneous country and there are different communities. Are people in Africa aware about different communities within India who are non-mercantile in nature, like the Bengalis, the Malayalis, or the Marathis, who are more focused on art, literature, or things like that? That was my question.
All right. Generally speaking, the perception in Africa is that any person of Indian or South Asian extraction is in most cases going to be a business person. So most of the Africans' idea of an Indian or a person of South Asian extraction is this person is here to do business. Non-mercantile professions in Africa, there are very few. However, you realize that when most will migrate to Africa, not all of them can be business people. They will go and have their professions, like as you said, art and other professions begin coming up. Because again, now, if you go, you'll find out that there will be a client, like for example, in South Africa, the population is the highest. In South Africa, the population of South Asians, specifically Indians, is the highest in the entire continent. And so these people will have some things to be served with. Like for example, they will require to have singers. That's art. People who can draw. If you go to Mauritius, the country with almost, I think, 70, 80% Indian influence, the same case is there. And so when that happens, the young ones now who are not mercantile, or rather merchants, will have possibly, and they do develop this in order to fill in the gap. Let's say, for example, I have a few Bengalis, Gujaratis, right? Punjabis in my country. And these guys are locals. They are not Indians, they are Kenyans. By the way, 2 years ago, the Indian South Asian people of South Asian extraction were gazetted in the country as the 44th tribe. We have 43 tribes. So they are the 44th tribe in Kenya, which means that typically they are local. But the fact that they are local, they will need some aspects of connectivity to their culture, like entertainment in their own language. You'll find out that somebody in Mombasa may not understand how to sing in Hindi or how to sing in Gujarati, Kannada. And so that person who is a local, who understands that, will come up, commercialize it, and possibly fill in that gap. Thank you. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Our next question for Dr. Pathak. There's a question in the chat box. Why didn't religion or belief practices from Indian subcontinent like Buddhism find any significant believers in Africa?
That's a question Paul should answer because somebody's talking in the background, but you know, it's very interesting that Buddhism started 2,500 years back and moved to the Southeast Asia much more easier than the other side. And now probably you'll find Buddhism very widely spread in Western countries as compared to the African countries. The reason must be that people from Buddhist background did not have opportunity to travel to African countries. Accessibility was a challenge, and another possibility was you have to go through the Middle East area, which was another dangerous scenario in those days, or go by ship. So I don't see any reason why Buddhism did not grow there, or why, or it must be the attempts which must be lacking. That's all. There is no specific reason, because Buddhism can equally be attractive to African mindset also, because it is very close to their thinking. But efforts must have to be done.
Thank you, Dr. Pathakji. We also have Mr. Ashiru Hamza Abdullah from Nigeria. He's the chairman of Nigerian Dostana Creative Club. Welcome, Ashiru. Mr. Ashiru, welcome. So we have been talking about the similarities and the similarities among the cultures, religion, and different aspects. So now we have one more question. It goes to both of our speakers. I will ask Dr. Paul first. You have mentioned that we need to have tradition and spirituality. We should keep it, and we should give hands to each other to support each other. Where do you see this relationship, Afro-India relationship, in next 10 years?
Now, thank you very much, ma'am, for the question. When you look into the question in terms of the time frame, I think we may not do a lot of justice with the 10-year time period you've said, because in most cases, the future at times, in most cases, is predicted by the past. These societies have interacted now for almost a century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries. But not much has happened in terms of religion. Both have their perceptions in terms of what is being spiritual slightly different. But the question is, can this perception of being spiritual be actually brought together? Can similarities be drawn so that at least they understand, okay, this is it? Because I tend to believe that when people realize that I am similar to you in this given way, then there's a likelihood of a higher cooperation. And so if that is the case, I would want to connect this with the previous question, which Professor was answering. Why is it that most Eastern religions, Buddhism, Jainism, etc., have not really found a lot of inroads in Africa? Generally, it depends on several aspects, like, for example, the mission, the motive, etc. And so this, in actual sense, really leads into what is the religions, maybe call it a master plan. Because, for example, when you look into specifically sub-Saharan Africa and the invention, or rather the coming of the Abrahamic faith, they actually kind of enveloped the religion into commercial approach. You come in commercial, or rather economically, your status goes up. And so now that is what has gone into the attitudes of many. In project management, sorry for sounding a little bit academic, because generally I'm a teacher and I can't avoid it. In project management, the project writer will always ask, what is in it for me? And everything revolves around that. Thank you.
Dr. Pathak, your views on it.
You know, Dr. Paul Katuse has said a very wonderful thing and referred to the project management. I would like to share a very interesting project management which is happening now in the pandemic. What is happening is, all over the world, every country is struggling for vaccine. And it is only the leadership from India who is kind enough to make sure the social well-being for rest of the world. And that's why people from Brazil came up with a beautiful picture saying that the vaccine is brought to Brazil by Hanumanji. That was a very nice picture which was going on around. But it is the concept of leadership, and I think it is changing. The global leadership has to change. Global leadership just cannot think about, now it is happening in America that the Pfizer and BioNTech had cancelled several of their orders, came from different countries, and providing the vaccine to the American people. Because the previous American president did not invest in the vaccine doses at the right time. So they were having no vaccine there. And now they force the company to cancel it. This is totally against the principles of African thought processes or the global thought processes. It is so bad. And now it is the time for, if people like, I shouldn't be taking the political name, but people like Narendra Modi, in spite of a severe pressure from within, with 1.3 billion people, still want to share the vaccine to the rest of the world. And I'm seeing the reports from Dominica. They were saying that we are only 72,000 people's country, would have never got any vaccine supply from anybody for coming 10 years. You know, that type of statements are coming. So obviously there is a need for change in attitudes of the leadership on global level. If that happens, then automatically people will start going back to the basics of African traditions: functionality, collective decision making, social being good for all the society, not for every individual, or individualistic should go down and the socialistic should go up. Socialistic, not the political socialistic, but social consciousness should go up and work for this society. And this type of leadership we have seen, as our good friend Pritenji was asking the question, 10 years back, nobody in Bharat Mata would have dreamed about some of the things which are happening in India. It is simply one change in leadership, and a proper approach towards life has changed a lot of things in India, and that is what is needed. If there is a leadership change in Africa in 5 years, you will see an entirely different picture of Africa in global scenario. And I always pray God that at least for 5 to 10 years, let African countries get a president or a leadership which thinks from African perspective, which thinks from African traditional wisdom. As soon as they start thinking Harambe and Ubuntu, I think there will be massive change in African scenario. And I'm very positive about it, and it will happen. It's a matter of time.
Thank you very much. We all hope and wish that Harambe and Ubuntu words become significant. Now we will take one more question from Yashika Singh. She wants to ask one question. We'll take that question. This is our last question for this evening. Is Yashika ji here? You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Namaste, namaste. Thank you very much. Well done, Dr. Pathak ji. It's lovely to see you again, and Dr. Paul Katuse. It's very interesting and an informative session. I think more of these sessions are critical. I actually come from the media space, so I've been also involved in some level of documenting the history of indigenous traditions here and in the continent. But I think, we've discovered also that there are so many places in our country, particularly like the Kalahari Desert, which has ancient sites that's dedicated to the Divine Mother principle, Unam Kuburwane, and which is similar to the worship of the Divine Mother in Hindu Dharma. Do you find that such knowledge is critical to be part of the mainstream, instead of it being confined to academic discourse and letting it lay in the universities, etc.? How do we make this more possible?
Thank you, Yashika.
I think I can possibly just chip into that.
Yeah, sure, Dr. Paul.
Thank you. Now, in actual sense, Madam, the fact that we are in a dispensation whereby everything must be documented. First and foremost, you cannot really discount the position of the academia, because the academia, and of course, through what also you are doing, is all about, knowledge management, retrieving that information, documenting that information, keeping it safe for the generations to come later. The issue which possibly we need to ask ourselves is, how do we translate that knowledge into practice? Because practice is what connects now into the actual aspect of being spiritual, and eventually what I loosely call the jacket, the religion. Because to me, what is more important first is the spiritual aspect. How am I connected in the spiritual realm to my Mecca, right? Of which, when I talk about my Mecca, the word Mecca is a trait of God. You used an example which also explained a tribute of God, right? And so the aspect of conversion of knowledge, what has been documented, or whether it has to be documented into practice and action, is what in actual sense we should actually now be thinking about and talking about and trying to see how it translates into that action. Thank you. That practice, sorry.
Thank you.
Dr. Pathak ji, would you like to have
I'm
something else to add on?
I'm reading the chat messages, and it is very enlightening, because what is happening is there are good things around us, but they are not properly projected, they are not properly communicated, and they are not properly ingrained in our mind. The more these type of programs will happen, definitely we'll have a collaborative approach will come. But then Yashika ji herself is in media, and she has been doing phenomenal work in South Africa, putting up many different kinds of programs on TV, educating people about different aspects of African traditions also. Because I remember last time when I was in South Africa, we had a program, and that was given on the TV there, and it was very received by people. I still remember my very interesting program which she had planned, where one of the African elder, a very well-known person, who used to be minister there and member of parliament also. So we were walking from two different paths, and then I was talking about Hindu traditions and he was talking about African tradition. Then we meet together, and then we talked about Afro-Hindu similarities and cultural similarities. And that type of programs really will educate more. And definitely the Kalahari mother worship has to be projected properly, because that is most important aspect of our society. And the more we have that, definitely the society will be better. It is for the good of social well-being. And I'm sure Yashika ji will definitely come up with a beautiful documentary on that for all of us to see.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yashwanth Pathak ji and Dr. Paul Katuse. That brings us to the closure of the ceremony today. Today was our inaugural session. We will be having webinars possibly every quarter. Thank you very much for all the distinguished guests who has joined from all across the globe. I believe from more than 12 countries. Our tech team, everybody, thank you very much. It was a very insightful, very, very beautiful sessions. We all have learned phenomenal history about Africa and India. Thank you. Go ahead. Namaste. I would request Amit ji to take over. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. It was a very interesting session. So many things I have learned. Dr. Paul Katuse spoke about how India and Africa were connected through trade, merchants, colonialists, and how our relationship will now change to more of selfless friendship. It was also interesting to know that South Asians have been added as a 44th tribe in Kenya. Definitely, this is something which I didn't know. And coming from the software and cybersecurity side, I also didn't know about Ubuntu being an African word. So thanks for teaching me that. Dr. Pathak also made some interesting points about how Africans, like Indians, honor the living ancestors. And he also emphasized about the heritage of oral history, how we remember things via oral history. And he also made a very interesting prediction that the new world history, new world order has to be created from Africa. With this, I would also like to thank all the participants, chief guests, dignitaries like Mr. Abdullah from Nigeria, Dr. Burian from Tanzania, Jitu Bhai from Tanzania. Thank you all for joining us. Please keep in mind that this was just the first session. We would be having future seminars. We will be doing quarterly events. We Post-pandemic, we'll also be doing field trips, and we also would be publishing white papers for which your contributions would be needed. Our mail ID and website is mentioned in the holding banner. Please feel free to connect. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Mercy.
Namaste.
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 Namaste. Namaste. Let me say namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.